Here's Brody Brazil.
You know, one of the things that I pride myself on as a broadcaster is maintaining pretty good relationships with the actual athletes that I cover. And during the course of the last baseball season, right, summer of 2020, did a lot of conversation with players on the Oakland A's. And there was one common thread that almost all of them either mentioned or at least said without saying. And that is how difficult the last season was to play from start to finish. Now, it was only 60 games in 66 days, so highly compressed. But normally, baseball is 162 games of a regular season before the playoffs even begin. So 102 more normally. Why did 60 feel like what they said was their longest season ever? Longest season they'd ever gone through. It's because everything on the inside was so different, so difficult, and I know from the outside maybe you didn't see it. What you watched on television, minus the empty stands and all those cardboard cutouts, in terms of the baseball, it looked and felt pretty normal. I get that. But I guarantee you on the inside, it was not that. It was a difficult job already competing against other major leaguers that became a lot harder when you also had to appropriately adhere to all the protocols, procedures, brand new rules to keep yourself, your family, and everybody else safe. Now, at this point, I also want to make the disclaimer. Professional athletes, relatively speaking, still have it pretty great during a global pandemic compared to anybody else who is an essential worker, maybe on the front lines. I'm not trying to equate one to the other here. I'm trying to help you get a deeper understanding of the athlete experience during this pandemic and how they're out there to help us feel more normal about life, but in reality, their life is far from normal too. We'll get to more of that in just a second. But I feel like anybody who's watching this right now, any of you who have already returned to your workplace, whether it's recently, whether it's 5, 6, 7 months ago, you can probably agree with me here. The old way, the normal way, what you've always been accustomed to, I mean, it's definitely not happening right now in most cases. And there's no thought, there's no, view that shows you it's going to happen tomorrow either. Like there's no light at the end of this tunnel of when things might be more like 2019 at the workplace all over again. Because let's be honest, if you're taking the necessary precautions, if you're doing the right things, if you're putting yourself in the right isolation, work is harder now. It's difficult to really explain that. And I know these things don't sound difficult. How hard is it to wear a mask all day? How hard is it to maintain distance? I understand, but when you add all those things up over the course of days and hours and weeks and months, work becomes a lot harder. And it really does feel like one work day under these new circumstances equates to like 3 normal old work days, right? It feels like that's the conversion rate. One current day is like 2 or 3 old days. And I know this must apply to a lot of you working individually or working in teams, whatever you do for a career, because quite honestly, I've experienced this now. It applies to me too. And I don't mean to make this too personal. I want to get it back to the athletes here in just a second. But I mean, I hope you know how much effort and passion I put into this job over the years. And that's not going to change. Don't get me wrong. I'm not showing up to not show out, right? If I'm coming into work, I'm going to make this the darn best show possible. No question about that. That's not going to change. But I also realize that maybe my approach or my mindset does have to change temporarily. That perfect show that I always hope for, maybe nowadays it's just, let's get through the show. Let's have a clean show. I hate lowering the bar, and that's not it right now. But I think you have to realize the bigger situation at hand and understand that there's greater problems in the world right now, and we're trying to get to better times. We're trying to get back to normal times in the right way, in the quickest way that makes sense. And I really am searching for optimism going into spring, and hopefully by summer, we have a lot more things figured out. But my mentality really is right now, let's just get through the next couple months. Let's just get through it. Let's do the best we can. In the old days, you may set more ambitious goals. In present times, let's get through them safely, securely, and as best as humanly possible. But I also want to switch this back to the hockey season that I'm now covering. And everything that I've just said from the work experience of 2021, it completely applies to NHL players, specifically players of the San Jose Sharks. I mean, this league started back up at the peak of a huge spike, the biggest spike so far in the pandemic. And Sharks players at this point, the future is not certain, but they will at least have been away from home for a month. Could end up being 5 or 6 weeks, could end up being longer than that. Still to be determined as I record this here and now. And so that begs the question, like, how is it humanly possible to be overly critical or even critical, even normally critical of players right now or the team and their overall performance when there is so much life impeding in what they normally do? Again, you're grading them on normal standards, what a player normally looks like, what a team normally performs like. It's not normal right now. I know we're doing these things. We're having sports go off for entertainment value, for people, to try and give them some form of normalcy while there still are a lot of restrictions. But there's nothing normal about the experience of these athletes. And so that's the story, kind of behind the story here, that I wanted to share. A lot of you are familiar with it at your work. It's not a lot different than what athletes are going through right now. And so as a person who a lot of times discusses a game right after it happens on television, maybe a little bit of critique and analyzation, I always think it's important that during these times, sure, they are professionals, they're the best in the world at what they do, and likely a lot of times it's going to look and feel normal because they're that good, right? It's what they do. But at the same respect, let's just not take it away from the back of our minds that, like I said before, it might look normal, but not a lot is normal. Be safe, everybody.